Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What They Don't Say with Shannon and Lauren. Today, we have part two of our episode with the CEO of Callisto, Tracy DeTomasi. Now, if you don't know who Tracy is or what Callisto is, you should definitely go listen to the episode before this one for more background, where we talk about things such as safety lists, which are all those things that are, cover your drink, don't walk alone at night, and why those lists actually can become a laundry list of ways to blame ourselves and a whole lot more. But on this week's episode, Tracy is going to go more in depth about Callisto itself. Callisto is a nonprofit that uses technology to prevent sexual assault. Callisto has a vault that's able to match survivors with other survivors who have been assaulted by the same person using key identifiers. Callisto is one of those things that I wish I knew existed when I was in college, and especially like before I was going through my court case and even during the court case. As survivors and as advocates, it's really important that we know what resources are available. That way, when we're talking to our friends about this or we're talking about sexual assault in general, we have those resources to give to the public to kind of have a toolkit, if you will, of things to support survivors and to prevent sexual assault. So it's not only you're talking about it, but you have resources to help prevent it. And you can give that to others. Like I mentioned, this episode literally picks up right where last episode left off. So if it doesn't make sense, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that. I love you all so much, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
You are the CEO of an amazing organization called Callisto, and we would just love to hear about some of that work, but also like why Callisto is such a value add in the survivor space.
So at Callisto, we have built technology to help connect survivors of serial perpetrators. It's revolutionary. I became the CEO about 2 years ago, and I decided to do that because I believe that this is actually a solution. In the 25 years I've done this work, the numbers haven't changed much, and I believe that Callisto has the ability to change that. And so what we've done is we created a highly encrypted tech platform called Callisto Vault, and anybody in the US and its territories with an active .edu email address has free access. So schools don't pay for it, survivors don't pay for it, and that means staff, professors, students, any alumni, anybody with a .edu email address has free access. So if you have free access to that, and if you're wondering, did my perpetrator harm somebody else? We have what's called the matching system. And it's really fairly quick and easy to enter into matching. You put in where the assault occurred, the state where the assault occurred, or if it occurred internationally, and that's because sexual assault laws vary from state to state. You put in a unique identifier of the perpetrator. So the perpetrator's social media handles, email address, or phone numbers. There's 12 options that we have right now, and you put in as many as you know. And that's what we match on. Then you consent to be contacted if there's a match. So if there are two people that put in the same Instagram handle and name the same perpetrator's Instagram handle, there's a match. It's not a dating app. You're not going to get notified right away that there is a match. We get notified, but because of the high level of encryption that we have, we do not see the survivor's name or the perpetrator's name. And so it protects against defamation in that way. And it also protects the survivor and the named perpetrator from false accusations or anything like that. So once there's a match, we then assign that case to a legal options counselor who is a legal advocate who has been trained on trauma-informed care and sexual assault and understands the options for survivors. That legal options counselor will reach out to both of the survivors or all of the survivors individually. And if the survivor wants to connect with them, we make sure that the survivor is in control in the entire process. They can respond and set up a meeting, and then they tell their experience for the first time, and they get advice. So what is the criminal level of sexual assault in their state? What does it mean to have criminal sexual assault versus a civil charge? What is a Title IX process like? Are you eligible for Title IX? Any of the questions that the survivor might have, also with connecting them with resources. Then if the survivors agree to and consent to this and they understand the risks of connecting, the legal options counselors will work on connecting the survivors to each other. And so they can pursue healing or justice, whatever that means for them. We do not investigate the sexual assaults. We do not represent, the legal options counselors are not representing the survivors in court. We do not report. We do not share information with the police or with Title IX. It is the survivor's responsibility if they choose to do that. So we're not trying to go after perpetrators without victim consent. What we're trying to really do is empower survivors to be able to make that decision. In the past, if we look at the Me Too movement and how some of these high profile perpetrators were held accountable, it was because there were multiple survivors who came forward. If you look at the case of Larry Nassar, who was the USA gymnastics coach or doctor who assaulted over 100 women and girls, he was reported in 96, in 2001, in 2002, in 2003. Right. He was reported to Title IX. He was reported to police. He was reported to coaches. People knew. And nobody did anything, and the systems failed him. So there were people that tried to do stuff in those systems, but the systems really failed. And then it took a reporter in I think it was the Indianapolis Star, I think was the paper. And it also took one of the survivors, Rachel Den Hollander, to come forward and be named. And she was really smart, and she knew that if she named herself, she knew there were other victims, and it worked. First of all, I would highly recommend her book. It's an incredible read, but it took her coming forward and publicly disclosing and dealing with all of those comments that we've already talked about, and experiencing all of that for other survivors to feel safe to come forward. And once they did, that was so powerful. He was held accountable. He was put in jail for hundreds of years. And the survivors got to say victim impact statements and to really confront him, which was really, really healing for the survivors. Now, not all survivors want to do that, and that's okay, but we want to give them the option to connect before they have to go public, before they do a report. They can report and use our system. It is not an either or, it is just another option. Again, in October, everybody with a .edu email address has free access. We are 100% philanthropically funded, so it's no charge to the school. And we're really working on spreading the word at this point. I know that there isn't a lot of studies about the power of connection, but having worked with survivors as long as I have, there anecdotally is a huge healing factor of just knowing that perpetrator harmed somebody else. Because if you're feeling guilty of I drink too much, knowing that you're not the only one, it wasn't about you.
Right.
It wasn't your behavior. Or maybe I didn't know that I was sexually assaulted. Like, was that sexual assault? Did I have something to do with it? And you find out that you're not the only one, it was sexual assault. And it just changes that. I know Jess Michaels is a really good friend of mine, and I share this story with her permission. She is a 1992 survivor of Jeffrey Epstein, and she lived with that for almost 30 years. And then she saw Jeffrey Epstein's face in the paper. She didn't know his name. She just knew that was her rapist. That was when her healing journey started. Just knowing that she wasn't the only one changed how she was able to really start healing. And she's a huge advocate of Callisto at this point, because she knows the power of collective action with survivors. And I hope that in 10 years, Callisto doesn't have to exist, that the reporting systems and the criminal justice system and the civil justice system work better. I really hope that that's where we get to, and that I can close this organization down. But until that happens, we need another route. And this is the route that we have done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy how validating it can be to know that there are other survivors out there. Obviously, it's like you don't want that, right? Because you don't want anyone else to have experienced the pain that you've experienced. But me and Shannon can really speak on behalf of that, because in our trial, their investigation found other women, and
that we didn't know.
Yeah. And I know that in a lot of cases, the other women are not found, or that doesn't come to light. And so I guess in that way, it was fortunate that these women not only were found, but were willing to speak on behalf of what happened to them. But just one of the women had the same fucking story as me, the same exact story. And after hearing that, it was oh wow, this is really real, and this is what I experienced, and that was fucked up. That should never have happened. This whole thing is messed up. But it was so validating, and it really actually did help me take a step forward in like my healing process that I think would have taken me a lot more time to get to if I hadn't had that. And so with an organization like Callisto, you know, being able to find that before you even start or like before you decide to report or like whatever it may be, I think that could feel really less isolating too. And like I couldn't imagine going through a process like this like completely alone and just like thinking that like I am the only one, like there's no one else out there that was raped by this perpetrator, like I don't know if I can do this by myself. And so it like breaks down that barrier. And then like if you do find a match, like and they maybe you want to press charges and maybe they also want to press charges and then you feel like you have a fucking team that you can go to war with.
Well,
Great
and I
idea.
think that you know, every time we get a match, it's this, we got a match. Got a match. Because we
Yeah.
know what that means. But we also know that we're giving survivors hope when that happens, because 90% of sexual assaults on college campuses are committed by serial perpetrators who on average offend 6 times while in college. So if we can identify that survivor or that perpetrator after 2 offenses, after offending 2 people versus 6, we're going to reduce college sexual assault by 59%. And that's the impact that I think Callisto can have. But not only that, again, it's about the survivors and the healing that they have. So, you know, the first 5 years of what we're going to do is really going to focus on the survivor. And then we're going to be able to get to those systems and to those holding those perpetrators accountable, because our systems take forever to hold perpetrators accountable if they do. But so that's why we're starting with the survivors, making sure that they are in the driver's seat of all of this. Just what I said at the beginning, if we hold those perpetrators accountable, that's prevention. And so we are intervention and prevention all at the same time. So one of the questions that we get often is that does the perpetrator have to go to the same school? And absolutely not. You can name anybody. And we also get about false accusations. What about false accusations? Every part of our process is confidential until the survivors connect. We can't guarantee confidentiality. We ask them to agree, but we can't guarantee that. So we do not report to police. We do not report to Title IX. So there's no defamation and there's no false accusations because it's not going anywhere. It's only being talked about in confident. Either it's in our encrypted platform that we cannot pull the information out of, or it's with a confidential source that you're talking to and getting advice who cannot share that information. And I also want to say that, you know, we talk about men being falsely accused. And I think that there's, you know, there's more of a push about, well, what about false accusations? And we're worried about men and we're worried about boys and we're worried about all this stuff. But men on college campuses are more likely to be sexually assaulted than they are to be falsely accused of sexual assault. And so the people who are worried about false accusations are typically not worried about men being sexually assaulted. And that's the other thing about Callisto and Callisto Vault. We know that anybody can be a victim of sexual assault. We know that any gender, any age, any race, ethnicity, we know that it happens more to people of color. We know it happens more in the LGBTQ community, and we know that it happens more to people with disabilities, but it can happen to anybody. And men on college campuses in particular don't often have resources. Title IX is often in the women's departments, or the counseling centers are geared toward women, or the sexual assault resources are geared towards women. And men don't see themselves in that. And nobody's talked about what it is like to be victimized by men, especially if it's a female perpetrator. Although most perpetration happens with even of men is caused by other men. So if they've got a coach, if they've got a hazing incident that is sexual in nature, they're not even identifying that as sexual assault. And so this is a great resource for men, because I don't think that we understand the full scope of sexual assault to men, especially having worked with boys for a huge part of my career. I really don't think that we understand the full scope of that, because they're not reporting and they're not sharing. And I think at this point, women are sharing more and more and more, and men are not.
Right. Because there's like
shame.
a space has been built for women to start sharing their stories. And I don't think that has been created for men. I think the other thing about Callisto is in a time of your life where you feel so fucking powerless, this kind of gives you a sense of power and authority over your decision-making processes and like what you want to do. And I think that can also just be really vital to healing as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked to survivors that we know entered into matching, whether or not they've matched or not, I'm not sure. Cause again, we don't have that information, but, we've talked to survivors who just the process of entering into matching, especially if the system failed them and they did report, they were like, I thought after I didn't get justice in the system, that was it. That was my only option. And they feel hope again,
Mhm.
whether or not they match. They just know that there is somebody that believes them, that they might not be the only one, and that this whole organization exists.
Right.
And this whole tech platform was built and money was spent and people are donating money to this because they believe that enough people can benefit from this. And that's hope for survivors.
Fucking
Yeah.
love Callisto.
I
Put that
love
out
that you
there.
love Callisto.
Yeah. And
I
cool
mean,
with
I
that.
talk to people of all ages, and I always know when I give my spiel and I can tell the look on their face, and somebody pauses, men and women, and they look at me and they go, I wish this happened I wish this existed when I was in college. And that's
Mhm.
all they have to say.
And people should talk
And
about it. Like if you're listening to this, you should check it out. You should look at the episode description, click on the link, check out what Callisto is all about, but tell other people about this because like Tracy had mentioned, you have no idea. It's not a matter of really when, it's more if, and that's unfortunate. But think about what sort of empowerment you could be giving somebody else if you're educating them about Callisto.
yeah, and we have a free online toolkit to spread the word. So you can print posters and flyers, and there's resolutions for student government, and there's PowerPoint presentations to be able to talk about this and include us on your website and your resources for survivors. Survivors that have .edu email addresses, contact us. I would love to be on other podcasts. Like I was so excited that you invited me to be on this podcast because we want to spread the word, And so if your listeners have a .edu, go create an account. Even if you haven't been assaulted, go create that account, because if you lose your .edu, then you're not going to have access. Once you get access, you don't we encourage you not to continue to use your .edu. That's only to get access. And then you'll have a username that you can go and you can use whenever. We will expand eventually beyond academia, but it takes a while to fundraise for all of that. But spreading the word is important because not every college student wants to talk to a Gen Xer about sexual assault, but they're going to talk to their peers. And a couple years ago, we had a survivor that said, I believe that at least one person in every friend group on a college campus needs to know about Callisto. And we fully believe that's the case. And it's hard to share about sexual assault resources. Nobody wants to follow our Instagram page because they don't want heavy stuff coming up. They want kittens and puppies and viral dances. They don't want information about sexual assault on their feed. So it's hard to spread the word about this. And so we do rely on folks like you and your listeners to do that. And we encourage everybody to do that. And if you need help, we've got Callisto Ambassador Program. So that's volunteers who are students to spread the word on your campus. We will help you do that. We will train you on doing that. If you run or are involved in a local rape crisis center, we want to talk to you. If you're a SANE nurse, we want to talk to you. We want to talk to people who are really interested in this and who can help us spread the word, because that's really, really important.
As we know, colleges like to pretend like rape is not a thing. It doesn't exist. It's not a problem. So kind of from like the campus perspective, what is some pushback or like challenges that you've experienced with like trying to get Callisto more into these college campuses?
Yeah, it's been all across the board. So, a lot of times we work with students because we believe in the power of students and they push it forward. We get a lot of resistance from admin. And I think a lot of it is because they just don't understand what we're doing. And so rather than embracing change, they are like, nope, we're not going to deal with that. So a lot of times administration doesn't want their students to have access or doesn't want their students to promote this resource, where, in my opinion, we're just like a rape crisis center. We are a third-party nonprofit that is helping survivors, and we are another resource. We are not taking over Title IX. You can use Title IX and you can use us. You can go to the police and you can enter in information to Callisto Vault. You can use both. I think that a lot of schools don't believe they have a problem with serial perpetration on their campus, which is false. Every campus does. I think that unfortunately there's a lot of myths that people don't think about. They hear, oh, sexual assault numbers are increasing, and they think that there's more sexual assault happening, which is not true. We want reported sexual assaults to go up because it is the most underreported crime. So until the survey data matches the criminal data, it's a reporting issue, it's not a crime issue. And so we want those numbers to go up. And if I had kids that I was sending off to college, which I don't, but if I did, and they had 0 sexual assaults on their campus, I would say that is not a safe school. Because that means they're not reporting and they're not taking those reports seriously and they're covering up stuff. We know that Larry Nassar was covered up. Liberty University just got the biggest Title IX settlement in history of 14 point some million dollars because they covered it up. And their whole thing was, we are the safest campus in the US. But they weren't. They were just making it look like they were the safest campus. And so a lot of schools are worried about the PR issue of us uncovering serial perpetrators on their campus and what does that mean for safety and what does that mean for enrollment numbers. But we are here to say that that lets them deal with it. That gets them off of their campus, because the people on the campus, you know who the issues are, you know who the problem professors are, you know who the problem fraternities are, you know who, you know, so many people, these perpetrators are walking around in plain sight. And so I think that that's a big pushback, and it's going to cost these schools money, especially if they have been covering it up,
Right.
or it's their star athlete or their star coach or their star professor that's bringing in a lot of research money. It's all of that. And so I think that, and again, it's just confusion as to what we do, because we are paving the way. Nobody else is doing this. And so people just
Right.
don't fully understand, and they're worried about defamation. They're worried about false reporting. And rather than talking to us, and some administrations have, and they're great, and some don't. And some talk to us and they're still like, no, we don't want you to be involved. And so the more support we get, and the more pressure we put on those schools that don't want access, because there is a precedent of other schools and administrations really going, I get this. I understand it. You know, we want to be part of the solution and we believe that this is part of a solution, is going to really just help our case.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, like, colleges just, they just don't even want to know. They're like,
They
if
don't
our
want to
star
know.
athlete is a
Yeah.
serial rapist, like, we just don't even want to know. Like, let's just let him live his life so that he can bring in money for our fucking football program, like, whatever. Like, they're just so, like, they just don't even want to know. And so, like, I could see schools, like, not wanting to bring Callisto in, because then, like, it would start to expose more perpetrators on their campus, and, like, would expose the fact that, like, yeah, they have issues. But I do hope, like, to your point, that as a society we can get to a place where, like, parents are like, oh, well, like, they're saying that they're like a crime-free campus and, like, nothing bad happens. Like, that's a red flag. Like,
Yeah.
we want our kid to be going to a college where they are taking ownership of the fucking problems on their campus, because then we know that they're actually maybe taking steps to doing something about it, and, like, at least kicking these kids off the campus. And so, like, I don't think we're there yet, because I think parents too also kind of want to live in ignorance of, like, oh, like,
Absolutely.
no, it's
Mhm.
everything's fine on the college campuses. Nothing bad is going to happen to my kid, which, like, of course you don't want to believe that anything terrible will happen to them. But I think it is important that, you know, we just, like, are in that place of understanding that it happens on every single campus, regardless of, you know, if you're like a super religious Christian campus or like a big state school, like, it happens. And
It happens everywhere.
exactly.
Right.
And we as a society just, like, need to understand that and know that. And I feel like we still don't for some reason.
Yeah. And I mean, the amount of people that I talk about, my school's definitely the worst. My school's the worst. I'm like, they're all terrible.
bad.
I've heard the stories from every school. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but there's not a school that doesn't have issues. And we can help that, and we can work with the schools, and, you know, we can be a liaison to the Title IX office. You know, we're not discouraging reporting. We're giving the survivor tools to do what is best for them, while also understanding that reporting is not the best option for everybody.
Universities love to talk about how much they care about their students. They love to just talk about it, but there's very few actions that you really see them take. And
Mhm.
so I hope that in the future, universities will say, I'm going to not only talk the talk, but I'm going to walk the walk. And when we say we care about our students, put your money where your mouth is. Like, look at these resources. Don't just have one, one or two little sexual assault workshops for freshmen and never do anything about it again.
And the greatest thing is that the schools, there's no cost to the schools. Their students have access regardless right now, if whether they want them to or not. The investing in Callisto piece is allowing their students to put posters about this resource. It's about including this as a resource on their website. There are no cost options to them unless they want to pay to print out our flyers, which great, fantastic. But it's just allowing student groups to be able to put up this and to have it as a sanctioned resource that the school believes in. We intentionally did this because we learned some lessons when we used to try to partner with Title IX years ago, and it didn't work. And it's because of budgets, it's because of all the things that we've named. And so we decided to take that red tape and to take those barriers away from the school, and empower the students and empower the survivors and empower the professors. Like, we know there's a lot of sexual harassment going on. And the other thing I should say is that we don't define sexual assault for survivors. It's whatever somebody has felt like they have been violated. So it may or may not reach a criminal sexual assault level, or it may or may not reach a Title IX case. But if they feel like they have been violated, then they can use our system. The worst thing that's going to happen is nobody else felt violated in that way, and they don't get a match. And just because they don't get a match also doesn't mean that that perpetrator hasn't assaulted somebody else too. It just means that the other survivors may not be using our system.
And whether colleges want to spread the word and be a part of that process or not, it's going to overtake the campus.
Exactly.
It's at some point in time. So
it's best because we're going to get big. And when we do, the schools that are involved now can say we were involved from the beginning versus we got involved when there was a PR nightmare.
And that's normally when it happens, though. Like, schools, a university gets absolutely destroyed by the media for how they handled a rape case, and then they're like, oh shit, now we have to care. But it's like, it shouldn't get to that point. Like, why does it have to get to that point for these colleges to give a shit? Like, that's ridiculous.
I'm waiting for the day when somebody says we become a verb, and somebody says, don't do that, otherwise you'll get Callisto'd. And it makes people think about, did I really get consent?
Yeah.
Like, could this be something that somebody would feel violated for, that they would see if I've done this to somebody else? So I'm going to check my own behavior to make sure that nobody puts me in this system.
We briefly mentioned some myths that go on, whether that's false reporting rates or just general sexual assault rates. And we hear lots of myths all the time, either spoken to us or talked about in conversations. And one of the biggest ones is that we hear a lot that, oh, well, person B never would have been assaulted if person A had just come forward and reported the perpetrator in the first place. Can you sort of discredit this myth and sort of talk about why this isn't the conversation that we should be having?
That's absolute bullshit.
Period.
Just period. Start there. And why it's bullshit is because it is not the responsibility of the survivors to hold perpetrators accountable. It is the responsibility of the systems, and it is the responsibility of the perpetrator. And so often survivors have come forward and it hasn't done shit.
Yep.
There were so many people that reported Harvey Weinstein. There were so many people that reported Bill Cosby. There were so many people that reported Larry Nassar. There were so many people that have reported so many perpetrators and were not believed and didn't prevent multiple victims. So it is not the responsibility of that survivor, because the systems are sometimes more traumatic than the perpetrator. Like, there's so many survivors that say going through the process was way more traumatic than the assault itself. And, the statistics out there of that, out of 1,000 sexual assaults, 310 are reported to police. And only 25 of those will be incarcerated. Why would a survivor want to report on that statistic? There's no benefit of them. You think about Chanel Miller, who was raped or was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner. She went through if you read her book, also a very good book, she went through 2 years of impacting her life in the criminal justice system for him to get 6 months and then out by 3. Was that worth it? Was that worth the 2 years that her life got put on pause for it? And so it is never the responsibility of the survivor to find another survivor to prevent that. And I know a lot of survivors will say, I want to make sure the perpetrator is held accountable so he or she doesn't offend somebody else. And that is noble. And that is, we are willing to help other people so often than we're helping ourselves, but it is not the responsibility of the first survivor to do that, because so many have.
Right.
So many have. The amount of survivors that I've talked to, including these high profile perpetrators, because I've talked to victims of all of the high profile, or well, not all, but a lot of the high profile perpetrators. And they say, the first thing somebody says, well, why didn't you tell anybody? I did tell somebody. I told a lot of people. And I was treated worse, and I was hushed, and I lost my career, and I got put under an NDA that I couldn't get out of, and it impacted my mental health, and I was threatened, and I was followed, and like all of these things. So people have told. So until the system gets better, and the system is actually holding perpetrators accountable in the way that it should, and it's not traumatizing to the survivor, that might be when we can say that. We are so far off of that. That's not going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And until then.
And until then, it is not. If you are a survivor who did not report, and then you found out that the perpetrator assaulted somebody else, the only person's responsibility that is that perpetrator. Period. Do not have guilt for that. That is not your responsibility. And you could not have prevented that. The only person that could have prevented that is the perpetrator.
So well said.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen. Snaps for that.
Also, I would just like to say that, yes, perpetrators need to be held accountable, call to that, but also call to action for all the people in the justice system who have mishandled sexual assault cases.
So often judges and lawyers don't know about trauma. They don't understand that fighting isn't an option. And our laws, again, said that you had to fight. And they don't understand why survivors say one thing and then will take that back. Well, there's a fear there. There's probably threatening behavior. It doesn't mean that that person's not guilty. Look at Harvey Weinstein. He got found guilty. And then on a technicality, because too many survivors told their story to put him into jail, because we couldn't believe just one, there was a mistrial. It doesn't mean that he was not guilty. The same with Bill Cosby. He is out, not because he's not guilty, because he actually acknowledged he was guilty and did a plea deal back in the day that should have never even been counted in this, and got released on a technicality where he couldn't be tried twice. Not that he wasn't guilty. And so we need to educate judges, we need to educate lawyers, we need to educate police officers. And I've done a lot of that work about how to be trauma informed and how does trauma work. And the more those systems understand trauma, the more it changes their job for the better. And the more they can see these things, and the more they can see how we do need to include serial perpetration, and we do need to include this patterned evidence in Title IX cases and in criminal cases, because it's not just one event. And because it is so hard for evidence to prove the he said, she said, when now we can make it we said, and you can see that pattern evidence of what Harvey Weinstein did and how it was a cycle for him. And you can't always see that pattern or that cycle if you're not looking at all of them, when they're all exactly the same story, and they didn't say it at the same time, and they didn't even know each other.
It's so important that these people are educated on this. These people whose, like whether or not a perpetrator goes to jail is in the hands of a judge, a jury, attorneys, how well they perform, all of that. And saying like, oh, well, we just didn't really understand the fight or flight. Like, that's not an excuse anymore. Like, we have Google, we have all of these incredible resources. And, people like you are doing your part to try to reach out to these people in power and educate them. But you also need the people in the power to reach out to resources like you, not just you going up to them. They need to level themselves and know that this is going to make the process better for everyone. And instead of just doing things the same way we have over and over and over again, like, look around, shit's changing and you need to change with it.
Yep.
It's about taking that step to educate yourself in order to be a part of that change.
And we have to admit that we were wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
there was stuff that I believed 20 years ago when I started this that I'm like, oh, I said some really terrible shit. That was really victim blaming. That wasn't appropriate. But I've evolved and I understand that. And I've apologized for it. And I've, if I know about it, I've apologized when I can. But I do better because things are also evolving. What we thought was appropriate at one point is no longer appropriate. And we have to keep up with the times. One great example of culture shifting is the Christmas song, Baby It's Cold Outside.
Oh yeah.
Listen to those lyrics. They're
I'm
super
like,
date rapey, right?
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been saying they were date rapey since like 2008, probably. And then it caught on and then it got to be a trend. And then especially like in, Me Too, people started to see that. And then I actually learned, if you think back when that song was written, which was, I think was like 1940s or something like that, that song is actually about female sexual empowerment. Because
Oh.
back in the day, women could not actually say they wanted sex or like sex or do any of that. So in order to say they wanted to have sex, they actually had to pretend that it was rape.
Mm.
And so it was like, oh, what's in my drink was like hint, hint, key for, okay, well, if I can blame you for this, then people won't call me a slut.
My gosh.
Mm.
And so that was
That's
how they could get
wild.
away with it. So it's like you think about that, and it was like they had to pretend they were being raped in order to have agency over their own bodies to enjoy sex. But now we have more and more, not all bodily autonomy, because
Yeah.
I live in Tennessee. We don't have all bodily autonomy over ourselves, but there is more and more sex positivity and there is more understanding of all of that. And women can express themselves more and men can express themselves and men can say no to sex too. They don't have to be these sexual beings. And the more we talk about that, the more we can just have conversations about it rather than doing this tongue in cheek. We got to say this, we got to play hard to get, women had to play hard to get. Otherwise they were too easy. They were too loose. They were too whatever word we're going to say to them. And so they had to play hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
And now we don't have to, and we shouldn't. And I tell men all the time, if a woman's playing hard to get, don't chase after her. Just find somebody else.
Yeah. Just let her go.
It's not worth it.
I have like a little story to end on, and it made me happy, so I wanted to share it. Well, Shannon will get this because she knows my dad, but my dad is like, I love him. He's a great person, but him and I clash a lot. Like we get into a lot of arguments. We're very politically different. Like he's very conservative, like he's a wealthy white man, whatever. But I love him. He's a great guy. But we get into a lot of arguments and it's very hard to like convince him of anything. Like he's very like, these are my opinions and these are my ways and I like don't want to learn anything else. Like don't try to teach me about climate change. Like fuck you. But last night he made a little leap and like I've had arguments with him about like the justice system and like sexual assault, and obviously he like very much like supports like me and Shannon, like what we're doing and like us as survivors, but he's still a man and there's still a lot of things that he doesn't understand, and he also grew up in a different generation where these things weren't talked about as they're being talked about now, and so like, I can't fault him for that. But last night at dinner we were talking about deer because in they like are renting a new house. They like sold their house, whatever. And the place that they're renting the house is like there's deer everywhere. And if you like get near them like accidentally, they'll just freeze. Like that's their response to things. Like deer in a headlight, they will just like freeze. Like they don't like, sometimes they'll run away, like whatever. But like that is their like trauma response, I would say. Like one of their trauma responses, like they fight, flight, or they just like freeze, and they oftentimes freeze. And so we were talking about how like, oh, like why do deer freeze? Like why do they just freeze? And I was like, oh, like I don't know, like that's kind of like a trauma response of like a lot of different animals. Like bunnies, like they'll do the same thing. Like my brother's girlfriend was like, oh, like I just like I don't really understand that. Like humans don't do that. And it's not like her fault for not knowing that. Like, this is education. But my dad goes, oh, well, like actually it's very common trauma response for humans to freeze. And I was like, yes.
Way to go, Dad.
He
That's
gets
your
it.
dad.
Like, I was like, it was such a stupid like little moment, but I was like, oh my God, like he just said something that so many people cannot come to terms with for some reason. And that made me happy and I really wanted to share it.
I love that. I love that. I actually just went to a training and there's more stuff about polyvagal theory, which I am not an expert on, But rather than fight, flight, freeze, and fawn or appease, being all the same options, they're actually kind of more tiered, where
Mhm.
fight is when you don't feel like you're going to die. When you feel like you're going to die is when you get into the freeze or flee, like the
Mm.
flight and freeze, because you can't do anything else. Your body is so overwhelmed and you think you're going to die. And so that's when you freeze. And so fight is no longer an option. And for women,
Yeah.
that kicks in quicker because of biology, like not biology in our brains, but biology of like, we can't fight bigger men than us.
Right.
And it's about conditioning, of what we conditioned, of what we think we can do and what we don't think we can do. And the same with men. So men think they can fight more than we can. But yeah, it's this fascinating thing. But good on dad.
I
Yeah.
know. It's
That's
like a really
big.
little, it's baby step, but like, I don't know. It was good.
Baby steps are good, like my dad is similar to yours, and he's had to deal with me being his daughter. And there are some things that we clash on for sure. And then there's things like he'll ask me, he's like, that doesn't make sense. And we'll sit down, we'll talk about it. And he's like, I'm like, Dad, I've done this a lot. Okay, well, you must be right, but it doesn't make sense. So
Like, well, you don't have to fully understand it to agree with me. It's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Tracy, for being here. You're so awesome. You're so knowledgeable. I love what Callisto is doing. This is the perfect sort of marriage between like technology and social issues coming together. And we're obsessed with Callisto.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for taking the
Thank you.
time to be with us today and
No,
just
and
have a
again,
chat.
thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories and your experiences and inspiring and teaching others. It's not everybody can or should be a survivor that advocates in this way, but the fact that you two are and do it so well is really impressive. And it gives me hope of the next generation can do even better than what I've been able to do. And so thank you for giving me this platform.
We were happy to have you.
Thank you so much to everybody who listened today. We love you all so much. We hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll catch you on the flip side and cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.